Good morning everyone, Bren here. Welcome to this week's garden update, one which I'm really looking forward to showing you because guess what? I've finally finished setting up the new greenhouse. Now, if some of you are new to my channel, please don't get too excited because it's not one of those fancy greenhouses. It's one which I purchased online. It was quite inexpensive, cost me about $110, $115. Took me a couple of hours to put it together, and I'm telling you, I just couldn't be more delighted with it. So I'll show you that today, plus share with you a few modifications that I've made to the structure to make it a bit more secure against any high winds that we receive here in my garden. Now, before we get into that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of your comments, ideas, suggestions last week on how I can, really fortify the greenhouse and really help it, last longer and hold up against any strong gusts. So thank you so much for those suggestions. You may see some of them in this video, and I just wanted to know that I'm very grateful. Okay, so as well as showing you the greenhouse, I do want to take a bit of a look around the garden. This week I again spent a few hours clearing out more beds, and I'm actually thinking next week I may be ready to do a big order of mulch, the mushroom compost, so I can top up the beds and get them ready for planting. Okay, please sit back, relax for a few minutes, and let's get into it now. Here it is, my pride and joy. You may notice that it's not in the location that I said I was going to put it in last week's garden update. It's in a completely different spot, and this was a little bit of a last minute decision because I found this location receives a lot more sun. So if we just come in here and I do a bit of a turn around, you'll be able to see what I mean. Here the sun rises over in this spot and the sky is pretty much clear all the way over to when it sets over there. Like, there is a tree in that spot, but the sun is still high enough over that tree. So all of the seedlings in here are going to get full sun from sunrise to sunset. Do you remember last week I was having trouble putting this cover on? It just wasn't stretching over the frame, and I said I had to come in here and push all the pieces a bit closer together to see if I can make it fit. Well, I did that, plus I used Rob's tip of placing the cover over in the sun, and the sun makes the plastic kind of like stretch. I don't know how exactly it works, the science of it, but it did the job, and I was gradually, slowly, over a couple of days, able to pull this entire cover completely over the frame to the point now where I'm able to zip it up on both sides, so it's absolutely perfect. In the past, when it came to what surface I had at the bottom of the greenhouse, it was usually just like a layer of bark, and I found that very frustrating as the season went on because the warmer it got in here, the more seedlings I had, the more watering I did, it caused all the seeds, the weed seeds in the bark, to germinate. So this year what I've done is I've put down a layer of this weed mat to suppress them and hopefully make it a little bit easier to maintain. I have extended the weed mat outside of the greenhouse too for this section, where I'm either going to place some of my seedlings to harden off, or I was thinking I may try and grow some of my potatoes in here in little containers or grow bags. I'm now standing inside the greenhouse and it's so lovely and toasty in here. I think I may even buy a little thermometer just to, see the difference between the temperature inside versus outside, particularly on, those cold, frosty mornings. I'm just really curious to see what the difference is. Anyway, let's now go through all of the different modifications I've made to the greenhouse. I haven't finished it off yet. I still have some more changes to make, but I want to show you where I am to date, and what I've done so far I'm pretty happy with. I feel confident enough that it's quite stable, even at this stage. to, you know, have my seedlings in here and not be worried about them in the evening or during the day when I'm gone if we do get a bit of a gust. So let's go through them now, and I'll share even more with you next week. First thing I've done is I've anchored the frame onto the ground by using 4 sandbags in each corner. These were actually left over from when we had the floods, which I used a couple of times when we had another possible flooding in our area. So they've come in quite handy, and I feel like, you know, I'll leave them in here, and then if I ever do need them for any more floods, I can just remove them quickly and pop them near the garage. That's where a lot of the water comes into our property, unfortunately. But what I also was planning on doing is maybe putting some little hooks here in different sections just to make sure it's fully secure. This is what I'm talking about. I guess they're more like little pegs. I bought a whole bunch of these, I think 100 of them online, and they've actually come in quite handy so far. I've used some of them here with the weed mat, you can see, just to hold it in place, and I thought maybe some of them anchored in here too may just give that, you know, frame a little bit more security on the ground. Another thing I've done inside is I have tied down these little trays which come separately, and they usually just hang on top of the frame where, you know, I place all my seedlings. But to stop them moving around as much, I have some Ziploc ties. Now, I had plenty of these. They are plastic. I mean, they're not very environmentally friendly. You can also use like a bit of wire too if you have some of that on hand. But as you can see, I've placed some on every frame just to keep them in place, because, you know, any shaking in here, you don't want these, you know, slipping off and then your whole tray falls down. On the outside in each corner, I've placed one of these, which is like a metal post. I think you use them like when you're putting up a fence around the perimeter of your garden. So I have 4 of these in at the moment, and I'm thinking I may put an extra 2 here and on the opposite side, and possibly even a couple of shorter ones inside just against the frame in there too. And I'm also thinking, while these are, you know, protecting any kind of movement at the moment, I'm thinking I may put some wire attaching them from corner to corner and even over the top too, just to really make sure that it's not going to go anywhere on me. I don't know what it is about this particular garden bed, but every single winter after I've cleared it out, the girls use it every day for a dust bath. You can see the white chuck called Snowflake. She is covered in dirt. Snowflake is really getting into it. I have the camera on zoom because if I went too close to her, she would hop up. Even though she has been part of our family, should I say? I don't know. Some people might think it's a bit crazy saying that, but I look at her as a pet. She has been with us for over a year, could even be longer than that. But she still gets a bit nervous when I come too close to her. I don't know why exactly. I mean, I'm not that bad, am I? But look at her, she's having the time of her life. Really chilled out and relaxed. Since we're over by this bed, I want to share with you a mistake I have made, and hopefully I will never make it again. In this garden bed, I had a lot of dahlias growing this summer, and this one here I caged. You can see I still need to cut it back a bit more, just waiting for it to go a bit more brown. But with some of the other dahlias in here, I didn't use a cage, I only used a stake. The issue is that when I was clearing out that garden bed, what I did was I cut back the dahlia plants right to the ground, then I removed the stakes, and then I further cleared out that garden bed that was full of old and dying annual plants. And as I was pulling all those plants out, soil got a bit disturbed, everything got a bit mixed up, and some of those dahlia tubers are now well buried underneath the soil. I can no longer see them, and I do not know where they are located. Oh, I'm kind of annoyed with myself. I should have left the stakes in there a lot longer, or even just like all during winter time, because the issue now is that when I want to go and, you know, refill that garden bed with new plants, which I can do now in like, I could do it any time really, or I was kind of thinking in maybe a few weeks time, I'm going to have to be super careful that I don't accidentally dig into one of my precious dahlia tubers and destroy them. Yeah, so I'm just going to have to be a bit more delicate now when I am replanting that bed. And then in springtime, of course, I will know where they are located, because I'll start seeing lovely fresh green shoots pop up. I mentioned growing potatoes a little bit earlier. These are the ones that I'm going to grow this year. They're Desiree. I do want to also grow the Kifler potatoes, but I wasn't able to get any when I was at the shop, so I'll try again another time. Maybe next week I'll have another look for them. Maybe it's just me, but does anyone else feel like potatoes aren't as tasty as they were when you were a child? Because I just feel like whenever I cook them, especially for mashing, they are just so watery and they don't have any kind of big flavour. So I always end up having to add a lot of extra seasoning. I just remember when I was a kid, we used to get big sacks of potatoes delivered, and you know, oh, they were so tasty. And that's why I like growing my own, because I do find growing your own potatoes at home are much better than store-bought. I'm going to be planting these soon, but it's important to mention that potato plants are frost tender. We will receive frosts here over the next few weeks, but they're very mild in this part of the world. So all I have to do is just cover the pots or grow bags with, you know, some frost cloth or a blanket, and they'll be grand. So I'm very fortunate that I'm able to grow these here in this part of New South Wales over winter time. Anyone who's interested in growing potatoes, I do have this short video I made a couple of years ago when I did grow some Kifler potatoes that I'm going to share with you now. It's got a few little tips on how to grow them in containers. Today I'm growing these Kifler potatoes in this 10-litre container. I'd recommend you buy certified seed potatoes. So each of your spuds has these eyes, and it's from there where new shoots will grow. You can chit them and cut them up beforehand, but I'm not today. So I grow them in a mix of this, which is compost, aged cow manure and sand, and some pelletized organic fertilizer for some extra nutrients. In the pot I add 3 inches of this mix, and I plant them eye side up, about 5 inches apart. Then cover them with 4 inches of your mix and a layer of straw. After a few weeks, when your new shoots have grown about 5 inches, you're going to hill them up, covering them to the top of the foliage. Here's my watering tips, and in about 12 weeks you'll be harvesting potato. It might not come as a surprise to you, but I do love growing this veg. Well, that's about it for this week, everyone. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. If you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, great week ahead, and I'll see you again next Friday.